Many people ask me, why did I come to Hong Kong specifically? You know, because Hong Kong, we don't have a racetrack. I did an interview with RTHK a few weeks ago, and it was introduced as, you know, what's a racing driver without a racing track going to do in Hong Kong? But Hong Kong is the sort of place which, you know, you guys make things happen. I worked for 4 months in the UK trying to create what I'm creating here, you know, partners doing business together, creating joint returns, win-win situations for businesses. And they just had their head in the sand. And, you know, they wouldn't listen, they wouldn't have meetings, they just weren't interested. And I think there's one guy who has declined a meeting with me in the last year. Everyone else, if I've cold called, if I've contacted through someone, I've always been able to get a hold of them. If we just meet up for a coffee, a beer, whatever, we've been able to see what we can do together. Because Hong Kong, you know, we have a can-do attitude. So that's one reason. Obviously, KCMG, we have an office here in Hong Kong, also in China and Japan. So there's the link there. You know, it's just a fantastic place to actually make this happen. Now, to speak a little bit of the KCMG team, it's a fantastic opportunity. It's really exciting to be involved in something which is quite organic and it's happening. You know, the magic is happening at the moment. We've just announced that we're going to be in the Le Mans 24 Hours, which is the biggest motorsport event of the calendar. We have a Chinese driver racing for a Chinese team, or the first Chinese team in the series. And it's great to be able to sort of be involved in that program. And it's these sort of opportunities which are available for my partners and sponsors to get involved in as well. We have teams in 8 or 9 different series in Asia. Formula Nippon, which is just below Formula 1, which offers us a direct step into a category which can get me to where we want to be. And also the Formula Master Young Driver program, which is what I was involved in last year. KCMG, Paul, you know, the main ambition of the team is to become the first Chinese Formula 1 team. You know, Paul is very serious about what he wants to achieve, as am I, and I see the opportunity, you know, which we can grow together, and all of my partners and business partners to be able to create joint returns to make this happen. So, what does a Japanese F3 car look like? This is a picture of the car that I will hopefully be driving in Fuji next week in Japan. It does about 160 miles an hour. Acceleration of 0 to 60 or 0 to 100 kph in 3 seconds. 210 brake horsepower. It's a very, very physical car. So, you know, many people think that it's quite easy to drive. It's not. You have to be very fit to drive these cars. You know, so it's training with Leslie in the corner there, who's one of my personal trainers. Give him a round of applause for actually getting me into shape. We spend 3 hours a day in the gym together, 4 times a week, trimming the fat a little bit as well, but making sure that I'm ready to drive for this season. Who are my partners? I mean, my partners, you know, it's all around you tonight. Chocktails, the chocolates on the tables, that's a UK chocolate company who sponsor me. KCMG, obviously the race team. Nearly Friday, thanks to John Horton here tonight. Sideways Driving Club. I should probably say a big thank you to Nick Swanson, if we can have a round of applause for Nick. He's provided the simulations here this evening, and he's one of my biggest supporters here in Hong Kong. Recently announced Chris Dundon of Dundon Solicitors has also announced his sponsorship for our 2013 season. And then guys like Imagebox, who provide photography, BAM Motorsports, the Body Group, and Start JG, who recently announced, and also Angela Cummins, who we'll get to a little bit later. So these are some of my partners for this season. Well, we've already touched on a little bit the media coverage, the media following we're actually getting. You know, as soon as we can announce we're going to Formula 3, we've got articles lined up in the Telegraph, we've got articles lined up in the Financial Times, the BBC wants to come out and film in Hong Kong and Japan, and also Autosport, the biggest motorsport publication in the world. And there was actually an article 2 weeks ago in the Telegraph, and it was on Jordan King, who is another driver whose dad owns Sainsbury's in the UK. And the theme of the article was, you know, basically, yes, my dad, without my dad I wouldn't be able to go racing. And the article I'd like to see printed in 2 weeks' time is the guy who used to work at Waitrose stacking shelves just a year ago has signed for a Japanese F3 seat and is on his way to Formula 1. So this is what I want to make happen. Now, motorsport is a marketing platform. You can use it as brand awareness. There's business-to-business opportunities, which have been quite numerous. They're always the best way to actually bring 2 business partners together to create business which would otherwise be untouched. And also the idea of racing drivers as investable commodities. You know, if you invest in a driver, especially from an early age, and that becomes successful, you know, one example is actually Scott Dixon. $4 million was invested at the beginning of his career, and within 5 years the investor had a 500% return, so it's quite lucrative. Also, showing future success. Obviously, anyone who gets on board with me early at this stage of my career, although we are sort of getting closer to the top, so the time's running out. You know, anyone who does show that support for me, they get very large rewards. For example, if you were going to go to Jensen Button and say, wear this watch, he would charge you about probably $10 million. And if you come on board early, that would be probably 10% of the price, and you get massive exposure. So the benefits, obviously, with Le Mans, Nippon, coverage in Asia and Europe, with China's biggest race team. I'm offering a sponsorship package for not just myself, although that is available. Obviously, we've got the expansive KCMG platform available, and the B2B opportunities through Paul at KCMG, and also all of my networking in Hong Kong. So here's a very successful Scott Dixon, who races in the US IndyCar Series, which is the premier series in the US. So what am I looking for? I'm looking for investors, I'm looking for sponsors, both corporate and individual. You know, generally I always say every sponsorship package is always tailored. So if you are interested, then you know, we could just meet for coffee and I can actually, you know, tell you some ways about how I can get a return for you. Also brands who want to gain expansive exposure throughout Asia and Europe. You know, we've got a massive opportunity for not a huge amount of money for brands who would want to gain access to the Asian market at the click of a button. And also to meet as many people as possible, because at the end of the day you never know who you're talking to. So thank you very much for coming tonight. You know, big thanks to everyone for actually for coming along and supporting me. And I hope you enjoyed the auction and the raffle.
Thank you, Dan. Take a breath. Get some water. So, Dan mentioned a couple of his key partners in there. So what a great, actually, before I get to them, what a great brand ambassador he is. Dan, how are those shoes working out for you?
Shoes are absolutely fantastic, actually. They're the Enzy sponsored, Nearly Friday sponsored shoes, which feel very comfortable and very fashionable as well.
That's okay. Do talk to Dan about his shoes, please, later in the evening. There's a couple of key people, actually. We will ask some questions of Dan in a second, but there's a couple of key people that Dan just wanted to bring onto stage because they've been particularly useful to him and beneficial to him in the year that he's been in Hong Kong. Just going back to the testimonials from other experts. Dan's race engineer last year, who he'd never met, clearly, before he started racing in Formula Pilota, said that Dan's ability on track can't be overstated. To have performed as he did throughout the year on tracks that neither KCMG or Dan himself had ever seen, let alone tested, against opposition who were testing 10 times a month, was absolutely incredible. And that's what Dan achieved. Now there's another chap that Dan mentioned earlier, who sees Dan learning new tracks on the simulators, the ones that you see at the back of the room there. He's seen quite a lot over the course of the last year. So I just want to ask Nick Swanson, just to pop up and say a few words. There's Nick from Skybase. So Nick, you see a lot of people who can't drive for anything like me, get into your simulators, but just tell us a few words, you know, from a driving ability point of view, and you know, as a business partner as well, what you've seen in Dan in the last 12 months.
Nobody gets close to Dan in a simulator. That's I don't know how to express it. We had the previous owner of Sideways was an amazing driver in the simulators. No one had ever beaten him. Dan comes in and he's beaten lap records one after another. It's a great learning tool for drivers. Any driver that comes in and learns tracks will tell you so. And Dan has shown an amazing ability to just hop in on new tracks, learn them very quickly, and excel on those tracks. I've always been a big fan of Dan ever since he first showed up in Hong Kong. He showed amazing initiative. Coming from the UK, he emailed before he even got here and said, I'm on my way and looking for sponsors. We jumped on straight away, and yeah, he's always been an amazing worker, working not only for himself to get him where he is, but what he does for any sponsor, the work that he does to work your brand and everything else. Can't say enough for him, and his driving ability, I mean, it's second to none. we got down to Sepang to watch Dan race, and just to watch him in the pits with his race engineer, the way he works with his team, it was surreal for me. It was a first time to be able to sit in a pit garage and to see what he does and the hard work that goes into each racing weekend and the results that he pulled. So yeah, Dan, can't say enough for him. So big supporter, and definitely it's going to be a big year for Formula 3 this year.
Brilliant, thanks, Nick. Huge round of applause for Nick. And John Pratt, who's iZone driver performance commentator, talked about Dan impressing him not only with his natural speed, as Nick's just talked about, but also his mental approach to racing. He's a highly talented individual, both in and out of the car, and marks himself out as a driver who is going places. He has exceptional mental strength and can not only compete in high-pressure situations, but he can create and manage those situations that will lead him to his goals, and that's essential in modern-day motor racing. And there's another of Dan's partners and supporters here in Hong Kong who's helped him particularly in that side of his racing career. So I'd just like to ask Angela just to pop up on stage. Big round of applause for Angela. Just to give us her views on a slightly different side of Dan.
Thank you. I met Dan through his networking. Dan is, as everyone has kind of mentioned here before with regards to Dan, he's one very, very busy young man. He's always networking, he's always on Twitter, Facebook, and doing everything for everything. I'm in the business of helping people to realise their dreams. I help people to, sorry about this microphone, I help people to overcome whatever they need to overcome, work smarter, and really take control of their own destinies. And when I first met Dan and heard about him, I looked at his website, I looked at his videos, and I needed to get to know him better. And when I did get to know him better, it was very obvious within a few minutes, really, that I'd met somebody unlike anybody else I'd ever met in my whole entire life. And I don't know whether I will get the opportunity to meet anybody like Dan again in my life, because this guy not only has the ability, we've talked about his ability, Nick talked about his ability, he not only has the smarts, business-wise, as we've talked about, but he has passion like nobody else I've ever met. He has positivity that just oozes from his pores. He has belief, passion, just all of the things that I try to instill in my clients. He naturally has all of this, and anything that he's ever put his mind to, he's achieved. So his mental agility is truly second to none. And if you just think about anybody with those qualities, all of those qualities in one person that has the drive, excuse the pun, and the passion to do what Dan's doing, against all of the odds, I'd like to meet them, because I haven't met anybody like that before. So I kind of think of Dan, I like to use analogies when I'm working with clients, and I kind of think of Dan a bit like a racehorse. He's a racehorse who's tipped to win all of his races and to become a household name. But currently he's out in the field helping the farmer to make the hay that feeds him. And we don't want that. We need him to concentrate on what it is that he needs to do, concentrate on what he is bloody good at, and that's winning races. So tonight we have Hong Kong history in the making. We have the opportunity to support Dan and become a part of this amazing story. The underdog wins. I certainly know that he has the ability. We need to help him, and we can become a part of this amazing story just by funding him. So please, give generously, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela. See why she makes him feel good about himself. And then just one more person I want to ask up on stage, but just before I do, if anybody, it says up there, open to the floor, but we only have one mic. So if anybody has burning questions that they're desperate to ask Dan in front of anybody, just make yourself during the next speaker, just come forward a little bit, and then after the next speaker comes up on stage, then we'll take that opportunity to ask those questions. So Dan talked, I mentioned earlier, and Dan talked a lot about his team. You'll notice with Dan, if you follow his Twitter, or listen to him speak, or talk to him, he always talks in the plural. He always talks about we won, we came second, we're going to Japanese F3, and so on. And that's because, you know, Dan recognises that motorsport is a team game. It's about his engineer, it's about the team, everyone that makes it happen, as Angela just saying, all the people that make it happen around him. So I'd just like to ask the team owner, Paul Ip, just to come up and just say a few words about what Dan means to the team. And